Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to Trudy Haynes and Friends. And we're here today with Trudy Haynes, I'm she, and then we also have as friends Kathy Lee, the original, Gary Williams, the man about town, and the Philly Gator, Jerome Roberts. And I'm starting off with you, Jerome. Hi, how's everything? But you have a subject that's pretty dear to all of us and happens to all of us, but you might need a little explanation before you begin it. And that's the prison industrial complex. I don't think everybody understands what that is. So if you could give us a little briefing, we welcome.
I excuse the fire engines, but it is a pretty hot topic, the prison industrial complex. And before we get into it too deeply, we really have to talk about policing in America and how it really began. Back during the so-called War of Independence, or the Revolutionary War, the British were inciting slaves and Native Americans to insurrect against the colonists who had declared independence from Great Britain. So that is when the colonists decided that they started thinking in terms of policing blacks and Native Americans. The British involvement even carried into the War of 1812. And the third stanza of the Star Spangled Banner talks about slave insurrections because when the Star Spangled Banner was written, the slaves and the British had overrun Washington, D.C. Then you move into the Second Amendment, by the way, was written because in Virginia it was mandatory that the white people own guns so that, in case the slaves decided to insurrect. And then you went through Reconstruction, and post Reconstruction, you had chain gangs. I remember as a young man in the 50s seeing chain gangs in the South. So this whole thing, the prison industrial complex, is not new. We're going to fast forward to the 1980s. In the 1980s, there were no for-profit prisons. However, in 2009, there were more than 129,000 people in state and federal for-profit prisons. The prison population exploded exponentially from 648,000 to 1983 to 2.3 million, and that was in 2010. As well as there are 5 million people on parole or in probation. The situation has gotten so bad that 5 states, including Michigan, California, and Connecticut, were spending more money on putting people in prison than they were on higher education. Now, this is weird because the United States population is only 5% of the world, but we have 25% of the world's population. Putting people in prison has been very profitable as a result of the political dynamics. The current president, Joe Biden, when he was on the Senate Judiciary Committee in the 90s, when Bill Clinton was president, they passed all these laws, like the 3 strike laws, that put a lot of people in prison, especially black people during that so-called war on drugs. Such things as mandatory minimums, the truth in sentencing, 3 strike laws, they are all designed to keep and put black and brown people in prison. And the media has been complacent because the media sensationalizes murder. If you look at the 6 or the 11 o'clock news, it usually starts off with a murder or a fire, something that gets people excited or something that gets people visually excited. As more people are arrested, and sent to prisons, it became big business. Big business. Private prisons have staffing, jobs are created. Medical, food, transportation, communication. They're all services that these prisons have to have. Companies like AT&T, Aramark, GEO, which owns Wackenhut, banks that finance the prison, construction companies that build a prison, they're all part of the prison industrial complex. Now,
Right
with so
there.
many people in prison,
Okay.
go ahead, Ms. Trudy.
Go ahead. No,
No,
when
and I
you
was going
keep
to say
saying
that.
it makes money, no, it makes money. I didn't know that the prisons were supposed to be a profitable entity. So you're opening my
Well, it
eyes to
started
what.
out. Well, as more and more states wanted to put people in prison, there became options. And for instance, if you make a call out of prison to be collected, AT&T is the primary beneficiary of that, and they make tons of money off of calls. As simple as that, Ms. Trudy, is part of the political industrial complex. Aramark, a major corporation in Philadelphia, they supply food to
The food, yeah.
hundreds of prisons
Food,
around
yeah.
the country. And again, that's a Fortune 500 company. So the prison
Tell me
industrial complex, between the banks, construction companies, bond companies, there's a lot of money being made in this prison industrial complex. And now it's gotten
who
so
gets
bad
it?
that places like California, pardon me,
Who gets all of this money? It's spread out among these companies.
it's spread out amongst these corporations, Miss Trudy. They're
Okay.
making tons of money. As you put people in jail, the state has to cough up tons and tons of money. And all of that money is going to these corporations.
So, in explaining that, what can we as a group discuss about this? What can we do about it, if anything? I'm thinking about it very seriously now because I didn't know all of those facts.
Well, one of the key
I'll
things.
chime in. Okay. Go ahead, Jerome.
No, you go ahead, Kathy Lee, because I got some ideas, but
Uh,
go ahead, Kathy Lee.
well, here's my main idea. You have to understand everything is a system. There isn't anything, your body's a system, everything is a system. And the system is basically a group of interrelated or interacting parts that are designed to act according to a set of rules or a set of laws to unify common goal. So, what is the goal of the prison industrial system? It's the same thing, the goal of slavery. It was to make money. Always follow the money. And you are right, Jerome, it's rooted in slavery. You are right, it moved to convict leasing. The railroads were built. But when you look at how they have basically turned the entire uh, prison of the end of slavery to a new system, which they talk about slavery by another name. That's exactly what it was. It's cheap labor. The corporations are making a ton of money. Your tax dollars are funding these companies, and you're not getting any of that money. Nobody's getting it. An average, they prisoners make everything. They make textiles. They do construction. They make shoes, clothing. They even tried to get Nike to go factory have factories that prisoners work in because they have a code of conduct. The whole prison system has a whole work type of system in place where you're not sick, disabled, only okay, you have to job within the prison system. So what they've done is they've taken the U.S. prison system and they've done the same thing with a lot of African American, Latino Americans, and they've turned them into like what they did in Africa, Central America, Latin America, and Asia. They turned them into for profit networks where everyone works to support the system. It's a system, it's an economic system, race based system. But there isn't anything as a system, everything. So to me, the way to combat that is as a people to understand how systems operate and what they do and how they work. That's how you end it. When you understand the system, when we understood the voting, they they are putting in voter suppression laws to preserve the system. You can't have the changes because the goal of the system is to keep you at the bottom, people at the top, and to make money. It's just the three of economics. It's material, workers, and then the profit for the CEOs. That's really basically it in a nutshell. So the way to end the system is to understand it. And how do they feed the system? They feed the system with incarceration. And how do incarceration? You keep unemployment in place, you keep quality education in place, you keep everything in place to keep the system, to keep African American communities underdeveloped. That's what they're doing. So look at the prison system as another, I call it misnomer, third world country. And nobody gives a daggone about a third world country because the previous president called them shitholes.
I would like to add something. Um, on the other aspect, outside of the industrial complex of the corporations making money, just think about it. The police keep jobs, the judges, the lawyers, the bail bondsmen, all of these other institutions get monies out of this situation too. And that's the beginning stage because if a young man is taught how to approach a police officer, if he stops him in the street, that would be a stage where we could lessen that incident because most of the times the young people, when they're accosted by the police in the street, what happens is they give them a verbal argument or something and they end up getting locked up. Then you go you go to prison. They fingerprint you. You get fingerprinted, then your record shows that you've been arrested. So then after that, you've been arrested, you go to a job interview and they say, you ever been arrested? And you say, uh, no. And then they find out. So they're supposed to have a situation where your records, if you're under a certain age, are sealed. But that's not true because it has happened to someone in my family. So therefore, it starts from the very beginning of the arrest stage, and then it develops into a higher because, like all the other jobs that it supplies, like I just mentioned, the
Gary,
judges, the
Gary, I
police.
hear you. I hear you, Gary. But it doesn't start there. You're starting with the victims of the system. You have to look at the system. Those are the effects of the system. But the systems were put in place. All the laws and the rules are put in place, like with the convict leasing system, with the chain gang system. They target. They target. All you got to do is look what happened out there in with the young boy that was shot down in the street, Ferguson. What are the cops doing? You're right about that. They're targeting you for what? To protect and to serve who? Who are these police serving? They're serving the system. They're keeping the system in place. So therefore, have to get black children. It does what you tell your son when they need people to fill those systems. And the private Jerome and stuff was talking about, that's not new. You have to go back to Angola prison down in Louisiana. That was a plantation. Those plantation owners needed to rebuild. They tried to. It's you have to understand. You are the economic base of the system. These undereducated, these African American men, Latino men, even women, they are the workforce of the system, and they're not going to free that workforce because they're going to make their money, and they don't
And
care
that
who they step on, and they're going to target your son and target your cousin because I have to keep the system in place for no matter what you do. I'm going to change the rules. I'm going to change the game because the system will remain the same. And
well,
that's what
that's what
our
I'm
people need
saying.
to understand.
Well,
Exactly.
that's
That's
what I'm
exactly
saying.
what you're saying.
That
But
that's what I'm
telling you to
saying.
put
It's
your hands up don't work, does it? You still get shot.
Yeah, but it's a revolving door. So we know that it's a revolving door. So how do we prevent them from going through the door in the first place? Is what I was talking about. Because if you know that that's part of the system and it is a bigger picture, industrial or whatever it may be, how do you prevent the beginning of that stage? So, like, they have no recidivisms for young people. There's nothing that when they come out, what kind of programs do they have so that they don't get into this revolving door situation? That's where Miss Trudy was mentioning, what can we do about it? So
Yes,
we
what
know
can
what
we
this,
do?
we know what it is,
But
but how
but
do we
Gary,
change it?
Jerome, what I
But
understand that, but
Gary,
now you got to talk about the educational system. It's another system
correct.
that's not designed for you
I
to
understand.
be successful. So when we built Tulsa, we went outside of the system. And what happened? They burnt you up.
Right. Yeah. But we
Right.
know
You know,
that
and that's the
we
whole
know,
point.
we know that, right? But we still at the same stage where what do we do? Okay, we're in a system. We're a race of people, group of people, or whatever you want to say, inside of a system that doesn't like us. So
Wasn't designed for
how do
you.
we, right? So how do we get out of
Design your
that? That's the
own.
issue. The major
Design
issue
your
is
own
how do.
systems.
That's what I'm talking about. So now, how do
Yeah,
you design your own? We educate ourselves as to
there
what the
you
Yeah,
go.
system
we
is
have to
There you
really
go.
educate
talking
our
about.
own.
That's
No, you
right.
take
Yes,
So we
control of the
educate ourselves.
educational systems in your community. You take control. Look at CRT.
Right.
They are hell
Right.
bent on controlling what their children learn. Where are our
Correct.
parents? As a retired teacher,
Yeah.
they don't want their kids to know about racism in America. Then what you do is you demand that your kids have it in the schools where we are the majority. You take over that system. And if you don't want to talk about the prison stuff, look at this. This is basically inmate work assignments. This is the whole website on how prison survival guide, how to prepare to go to prison. They don't teach you how to prepare for no freaking job. They're teaching you how to prepare to go to how to go to prison. So maybe we need to come up with some community work assignments on designing systems. Think outside of the box. Create your own
You
system.
know,
I'm sorry for taking over.
no, that's what
the
we
key
need. We need some solution to this, something that we can
Right.
do.
Right.
And you're hitting
Miss
That's
on
where.
it
Trudy,
right now.
Miss
Right.
Trudy,
That's
one of
where
the
we.
keys is
Yeah.
we need to educate our own. Educational system is designed to fail us. And until we start educating our own, we're not going to be able to move. We're going to be cogs in the system.
So education is one of the things that we can stress.
Yes,
I would say designing our own educational systems within. Don't throw away the public schools. Go in and take
Uh-huh.
over them like you see them doing. Go in and run for the school boards like you see them doing. You don't have to be violent.
absolutely.
Just say, this is what my child is going to learn. I'm demanding that you teach this. I'm demanding that you have teachers that know the material, that can present the stuff right. Take the textbooks out of Texas, because that's who makes all of the textbooks now. And we all know
Yep.
Texas. We all know
So
Well,
Texas.
also it's about funding. You know, we got to have them divert the funding towards that system, towards other things, because where are we going to get the money? That's the thing. So money is the key also, because they're making money on us. So how do we convert and divert that money in the direction that's going to help us? See, that's another issue.
so we have to get behind our political people who are our representatives.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying, Gary?
Yes, I'm saying we
Well,
got to
that's
start somewhere. We have to start somewhere, because that's where the money comes and trickles into the community, is through the politicians signing the pen on the paper.
They're,
Because if
they're
you look
talking right
around and
now about
ask, eh,
infrastructure.
yeah, if you look around and ask most black folks, hey, you want to donate some money towards helping yourselves? What are they going to say?
I don't
You know?
know.
Yeah, right. We don't know. So we can't
well.
rely
The
on that.
key is again one of the things that Cassidy talked about is getting on the school boards. You see white people running for these school boards all over the country because they realize how important this is. You know,
Thank
Yes.
you.
school board representation, and the school board represents the way of controlling the way the funds spent in your schools.
So
So the
the first thing you got to do is
so
be educated to the fact that we can do something and we ought to be doing it.
Take
Yes.
we've
control of
done
your
it in the past.
communities.
In other
Be the
words,
ones to
nobody's
buy from
come.
your own selves, too.
In other words, nobody's coming to save us. Period.
Well,
Nobody.
We have to
all
save
exactly.
ourselves.
All right. All you have to do is just watch how other immigrant communities who are on a different level of the caste system, what are they doing? They're buying up whole blocks. They're creating small communities for themselves, just like they did in Tulsa. They're putting all their economics in there, their own schools, building their own cities within the city, their own systems within the systems, and people are going to them. But the history of this country is when we did it, they used airplanes and bombed us from the air. They went in and eradicated and wiped out everything. So I'm sick of saying we don't know how to do it. We've done it before, but the system keeps coming in and knocking it back down. That's the
Correct.
challenge.
Well,
This is
that should be telling us something to come together, because, like you stated, every other group of people is coming together, and they look at us and say, "Wow, what are y'all doing for yourselves?" And it's like amazing, because you say and you look at what they're doing and you talk about it, but you don't do about it. So we got to be about it.
No, well, we are about it, but see, here comes all the myths again. We need, as a people, to stop buying into this BS. We are
Right.
resilient people. We are educated people. We are a talented people. And speaking of a talent, I'm just telling you right now, if you want to talk about a little known Black history fact, look at everything as hot as it is. Air conditioning invented by an African American. But a little known history fact, even with these chain gazers, I want to talk about one of my favorite guys is John Henry. He was a real
Hmm.
man. He wasn't 9 feet tall. He was only 5'2". He was a shaker, and a shaker is someone that holds the stick in the rock and they bang it with a hammer and they shake it. It was African labor after the Civil War that built the railroads. So it was a true
Correct.
story. And that's my little known Black history fact. People don't realize that African Americans in the South built that. All the industries moving to the South, all the jobs left and went to the South, and they're heading even further south to Mexico because they have to create and keep the system going. But John Henry was a real person.
I got one. I got Madam C.J. Walker, the first female self-made millionaire in America, born on December 23rd, 1867. I mean, who would have heard of somebody doing such a thing? Like you guys started off, we were talking about hair, and she invented the straighten formula and the hot comb, and she was a multi-billionaire, and that was in the 1800s. Just imagine that. There's another uh,
well, there are plenty of
person
them. You're
that,
right.
yeah. But just to
No,
speak on
you're right.
things that we are capable of doing out of necessity and need.
Well, the
Well,
first thing that I think
even
that we are, okay, go ahead, Gary.
no,
No,
I was
Jerome.
saying, and going back to what he's leaving about the Black Railroad, one of the key inventions on the railroad was the so-called lubricating cup. Now, this was to lubricate the railroad engines, and it was designed at Pac-Man. And the railroad people who owned the railroads didn't believe it, but to do other white folks types of instruments, it didn't work as well. So white folks started coming back with the real McCoy. So Elijah McCoy invented this lubricating cup for the railroads, and even today, people still talk about they want the real McCoy. And the real McCoy
And
came
you,
about from a black man who invented a machine that could lubricate train engines. The real
and
McCoy.
you know what? You
So
know what,
black folks have
Jerome?
been doing it.
But guess what, Jerome? There was a show in the
But
1950s my cousin and I was looking at, and the name of the show was called The Real McCoys. And you have these like kind of oaky little people moving to California. So even they took the whole coin the real McCoy from us. And the real McCoy
that's
became
right.
this Virginia from Westfield, this family from West Virginia that moved to California before the Beverly Hillbillies. So they even co-opted that phrase, the real McCoys, because they're going to tell you, well, it's not that brother, it's this family right here. We're the real McCoys.
Yeah.
I got something. I got a book. It's called the Black Book, and
Oh, I have that
inside the
book.
Black Book, it has on a fence. If you look at all the brownstones and the buildings, maybe you can't see it, but there's a symbols that are there called the Adinkra symbols. The Adinkra symbols were the people that came from Ghana, the iron workers that made different symbols to leave their mark secretly on different brownstones. And if you go through the neighborhoods, people might not know and look, and you'll see symbols like shaped like hearts and shaped like different types of things like that. And this book, when you look through it, if people want to try to, find it, it's called the Black Book. Simple, the Black Book, and it tells you all the different things that we did and we were known for. Also, there's another book called The Culture Bandit. The Culture Bandit tells you more about how they portrayed us as if they were us and we were nobodies. It's called The Culture Bandit. It talks about how they stole different things that we created and just named it as their own. Culture Bandit.
Gary, that's quite interesting that you would say that. There's currently a TV show, and I'm not sure who it's on, Netflix or somebody, but the show is called High on the Hog, and it talks about the way the African culture and African Americans have influenced food in America. And if you get a chance to see that show, it's called High on the Hog. And they've done about 6 episodes, and they're getting ready to do a second season. But check it out. It talks about the African American influence on food and food culture in America.
I'm traveling to another level. I'm going to another level.
I hear you. Way to go. Ooh, okay. And speaking of astronomy, you have the one Dogon.
Yeah. Oh, the Dogon. Forget about it. They were the Twa.
We pulled this out of the
Twa people, the Dogon, the Twa, the Pygmies, they could see the universe with their naked eye. And now they've got all kinds of radio stations called Sirius, which is a star, Sirius, which is a star that they used to see with their naked eye. And Europeans have to use a telescope multiplied billions of times to see the stars. Isn't that amazing?
No such thing as a pygmy. No such thing as a pygmy. They're called the Ubuntu people.
Yeah, they call them pygmies. Right, you're right.
Bye. And we'll see you next week.